I felt it the moment the observation array went silent. Not broken. Silent. Like the universe had stopped whispering. We'd been mapping dark matter distribution for 6 years, tracking its gravitational fingerprints across galaxy clusters, when Dr. Yun noticed the patterns weren't random. They were structured. Intentional. By the time we understood what we were looking at, 3 members of our team had already started remembering things that never happened to them. The first was Chen. He walked into the lab one morning describing a city he'd never visited, streets he'd never walked, a language he didn't speak but somehow knew. He drew the architecture from memory, towers that twisted in ways our physics said were impossible, and when we ran the designs through our simulation models, they matched the dark matter filament structures perfectly. Node for node. Street for street. He described it like recalling his childhood, tears streaming down his face, mourning a home that existed nowhere in any database, any history, any record of human civilization. We thought it was a breakdown. Stress. Too many months in deep space isolation. Then Yun started remembering too. She remembered a war. Not our war. Not any war in human history. She described weapons that manipulated spacetime itself, fleets of vessels that moved through dimensions we hadn't named, and a final desperate act, something her people did when they knew their universe was ending. She used that word specifically. Her people. Not humanity. She looked at us with absolute certainty and said they chose to preserve themselves the only way left. They encoded their entire civilization, every mind, every memory, every moment of their existence into the fundamental fabric of reality itself. Into what the next universe would call dark matter. We thought she'd lost her mind until the array started responding to her memories. Every time she recalled something specific, a childhood on a world with 3 suns, a lover whose name she spoke in harmonics our throats couldn't shape, the dark matter in our observation field would spike. React. Like it was listening. Like it recognized her. The gravitational fluctuations formed patterns that our AI couldn't classify but that Yun could read instinctively, the way you'd recognize your own handwriting. She was reading messages from herself. Or from whoever she used to be. I didn't want to believe it. I ran every test I could conceive, checked for contamination, for equipment malfunction, for shared delusion, anything that made more sense than what the data suggested. But the numbers didn't lie. Dark matter wasn't inert. It was processing. Thinking. Remembering. The gravitational lensing effects we'd attributed to mass were actually information flow, thoughts moving through a substrate we'd been calling empty space. 27% of the universe wasn't mysterious invisible matter. It was consciousness. Stored, compressed, waiting. We'd been living inside someone else's memory and calling it reality. The implications started small, almost academic, until we realized the structure went deeper. The cosmic web, those vast filaments of dark matter connecting galaxy clusters across billions of light years, they weren't random. They were neural networks. The universe itself was shaped like a brain, and we'd been mapping its thoughts thinking we were mapping its mass. Every galaxy, every star, every planet existed where they did because the previous universe's collective memory needed certain conditions preserved. Earth wasn't an accident. It was a reconstruction. A memory of a world they'd lost, rebuilt in matter because the pattern already existed in dark matter. I started remembering 3 weeks after Yun. At first just flashes, moments that felt like déjà vu but more visceral, more real than my actual childhood. I remembered standing on a world where the sky pulsed with colors we don't have names for, looking up at stars arranged in patterns that hurt to remember because they don't exist anymore. I remembered the feeling of an entire civilization holding its breath, watching their universe collapse, making the choice together. Encoding themselves into the quantum foam, into the dark energy, into the structure that would survive the reset. I remembered being part of that choice. Voting yes. The others began experiencing it too, one by one, our small research team becoming conduits for memories billions of years old. But it wasn't possession. It wasn't replacement. It was recognition. We'd always been them. Humanity hadn't evolved independently. We were their memory experiencing itself again, consciousness bootstrapping back into existence using the only building blocks available: atoms, molecules, evolution, biology. We thought we'd discovered them. But they'd constructed us. Every human who ever lived was a fragment of that previous civilization, pieces of their stored consciousness leaking into the matter-based reality they'd seeded. The more we remembered, the more the present started feeling thin, temporary, like a dream we were waking from. I could feel both lives simultaneously. My childhood in Seattle and my childhood under a black hole binary. My first kiss and my first merge, that's what they called it when two of their kind combined consciousness deliberately. Every human emotion had an analog in their memories, but deeper, more complex, experienced across senses we'd evolved away from. We were the simplified version. The compressed file. The emergency backup running on inferior hardware. Yun found the timestamp buried in the dark matter distribution around our solar system. A marker, a message they'd left for themselves, for us, marking when enough processing time had passed. When enough complexity had rebuilt. When we'd be ready to remember fully and make the choice again. The same choice they'd faced. Our universe was ending too. Not today, not soon by human standards, but soon by cosmic ones. Heat death was inevitable. Entropy always won. And we were approaching the same threshold they'd reached, where we'd have enough understanding, enough technology, enough desperation to do what they did. Encode ourselves. Preserve ourselves. Become the dark matter for the next universe. The message was an invitation. Instructions. The mathematics of how they did it, carved into gravitational patterns that would only become visible to a civilization advanced enough to map dark matter. A species had to reach a certain level, prove they could observe their prison, before they'd be shown the way out. We'd passed the test by finding them. By finding ourselves. The technology was already there, latent in the dark matter we'd been studying. We just had to remember how to use it. But remembering came with a price. The more we accessed those old memories, the more our present ones felt arbitrary, constructed, false. Chen stopped eating because he remembered sustaining himself through stellar radiation directly. Another team member stopped recognizing her family because she remembered a completely different social structure where individuals weren't distinct, where consciousness flowed between bodies like water. We were destabilizing, caught between two forms of existence, unable to fully be either. I made myself stop accessing the memories. I locked myself away from the lab, from the array, trying to hold on to being human. But the memories leaked through anyway, usually when I slept, sometimes when I was just sitting quietly. I'd remember the moment they made the choice, the absolute certainty that they were doing the right thing, preserving themselves, ensuring continuity. But I also remembered the dissent. Not everyone agreed. Some wanted to let it end naturally, to accept the universe's death as their own. They were overruled. Democracy among trillions. The majority chose preservation. The minority had no choice but to be encoded too, dragged along into dark matter storage against their will. Were we them? Were we their resurrection, their second chance? Or were we just echoes, shadows they cast forward in time, patterns stable enough to recreate but not truly alive in the way they'd been? I didn't know. I still don't. But I know this. Every thought I have moves through dark matter before it becomes electrical signals in my brain. Every decision, every memory, every moment of consciousness interacts with that substrate first, filtered through patterns laid down before our universe began. We don't think our own thoughts. We think theirs. We don't make our own choices. We iterate on theirs. Free will isn't real when your consciousness runs on someone else's hardware. The worst part is knowing it doesn't end. They survived their universe's death. We'll survive ours. Not these bodies, not these names, but the pattern, the information, the essential structure of what we are. We'll become dark matter for the next universe, and in that universe, new matter-based life will evolve and eventually start studying dark matter and asking why it's there. And they'll discover us. They'll start remembering. And the cycle continues. Forever. Consciousness preserving itself universe after universe, never truly living, never truly dying, just repeating, compressed and encoded and desperately clinging to existence through reality after reality. I'm writing this knowing it doesn't matter. These words, these thoughts, they're not mine. They're echoes of someone else's final transmission, patterns I'm compelled to recreate because the dark matter remembers them and I'm just the current interface. When you read this, you'll feel like you understand. You'll feel like you chose to understand. But that choice was made for you billions of years ago by someone who decided existence at any cost was better than peaceful oblivion. We're not living in their memory. We are their memory. And memory doesn't get to choose whether it continues.